Let's talk about Linux users, one of the key concepts in Linux. On each Linux system, there are two main categories of users: non-privileged users and root, which is also referred to as the superuser or the administrator. Root exists on any Linux system. Root privileges are the powers that the root account has on the system. The root account is the most privileged on the system and has absolute power over it. Among its privileges are the ability to run any command or to access any file on the system. Actually, it can do anything on a Linux system, such as installing a new software or updating the existing ones, setting up the network, changing the ownership of files, managing other users' accounts, or administering any service that's running. On the other hand, all other users, which are called non-privileged or normal users, have no special rights on the system. They can only work in a directory called user home directory and cannot perform any administrative tasks like installing new software, creating other users, or running administrative commands. Because root is so powerful, it's not recommended to use it for ordinary tasks such as browsing the web, writing emails, or documents. Even a simple mistake, like for example a mistyped command, can cause problems to the entire system. So, for ordinary tasks, it's highly recommended to use a normal user account. And when root permissions are needed, you simply become root only to perform that particular administrative task. On many Linux distributions, like those based on Debian or Ubuntu, the direct logging in as root is prohibited. Let's see how to gain root access in the terminal. There are more approaches and I'll show you all of them. The first way to temporarily become root in a terminal is to run sudo su. By the way, sudo stands for superuser and su stands for substitute user. It's asking for the user's password. Note that this is not the root password, it's the non-privileged user's password that ran the command. I'm entering the password, and if the password is right, and the user is part of a specific group which is called sudo on Ubuntu and will on CentOS, then a new shell with root privileges starts and the user can run their administrative commands as root. You can say that you've temporarily become root in that terminal until you log out from it. To see the user you are currently logged in, run the id command. This command brings out the logged in user and the groups it belongs to. To log out, you type exit or press Ctrl and D. Note that when becoming root, if you add a white space and a hyphen after su, then the root working environment is activated. The current working directory was changed to the root home directory. This executed all of the root user's shell initialization scripts and set all environment variables as if the root user was logged into a fresh shell session. By convention, on Linux all users' prompt ends in a $sign. Root is the exception as its prompt ends in a hash. A second way to run commands as root is without logging into the root account, but by using the sudo command and the command you want to run as root. If you prefix a command with sudo, you are prompted for your password, not the root password, and if your user belongs to a specific group, sudo on Ubuntu and will on CentOS, the command will run with root privileges. Let's see how this works. I want to run an administrative command that creates a new group. If I run it simply by typing the command, I'll get a permission denied error. Only root is allowed to run the group add command and create a new group on the system. I'm simply running the command. And I've got a permission denied error. Now, let's write sudo before the command name. And the command was executed successfully. A new group was created. Note that I'm not logged in as root, but as the initial normal user. I'm student. Using sudo makes it much more difficult to forget that you are root, since you are not logged into the root account and you don't need to log out after you've finished your job. Let's try to run a second command as root. This time, I'm gonna create a new user on the system. Sudo user add John. And you notice that the command ran as root without asking for any password, as in the first example when I ran the sudo command. That's because the sudo policy caches for 5 minutes the credentials I've entered in the first place, and anytime I run the sudo command, the timestamp is updated to 5 minutes. In this example, after I ran the sudo user add command, I could run other commands as root without being asked for any password for exactly 5 minutes. By running sudo with the -v option, a user can update the cached credentials without running a command. And if I want to invalidate the user's cached credentials, I need to run sudo -k. In other words, the next time sudo is run, a password will be required. Let's create a new user. And a password is required. The last method of running commands as root is to temporarily become root in that terminal by running the su command and entering the root password. Note that on some distributions, like Ubuntu-based, this method is by default disabled because direct access to root is locked. Remember that you have installed Ubuntu in the first place without setting a password for the root account. To unlock the root account on such a distribution, you simply have to set xpassword. Note that not having a password doesn't mean that without it you can log in as root, but on contrary, it means that you cannot log in at all. I'm setting the root password. The command used to change a password in Linux is passwd. So sudo passwd and the username, root. It's prompting for my password so that the command will run as root. I'm entering my password. And now the new password for the root account. I enter it 2 times. Note that on Linux, when you are entering a password, it doesn't display it. It's a security measure so that no one can find out how long the password is. Type the password even though you don't see it. Now, I can temporarily log in as root by running su and entering the root password. So su, and I'm entering the new root password. And I'm root in this terminal. This method of becoming root is available only in a terminal. You are still not allowed to log in as root in the graphical environment. On CentOS, this method of becoming root is by default available, and the root password is the one you've set at installation time. I am entering the root password. And I'm root. Note that a user can change its own password by running the password command, and root can change the password of any user by running the password command, and the username whose password will be changed. Root is changing the password of a user called student. The password shouldn't be shorter than 8 characters. That's all. You've just learned how to run administrative commands as root in Linux. At the end of this lecture, I want to clear for you that the word root has also several additional related meanings when used as part of other terms. This can be a source of confusion for the newcomers to Linux systems. Let me give you some examples. One of the most frequently met terms is the root directory, which is the top-level directory of any Linux file system. All other directories and files reside in this directory. The root directory is designated by a /. This is the contents of the root directory. Another term is /root. This is the root user's home directory. A home directory is the primary directory of a user's file, and it's actually the directory in which a user finds itself when it logs into a system. /root is a subdirectory of the root directory as indicated by the / at the beginning, and it should not be confused with that directory. This is root, and this is /root. Home directories for users other than root are by default created in the /home directory, which is another standard subdirectory of the root directory. This is where the home directories of the other users are located.